Welcome to the BrettJohnson.biz podcast, where we discuss business on purpose, radically fresh leadership, capital that transforms society, and marketplace stories that embolden difference makers. Welcome to the Repurposing Business Podcast. I'm here with Cassie Carstens. Cassie, it is a delight to have you with us today to talk about a huge topic and one that's been on your heart for many, many years. So a couple of weeks ago, I put out a blog on Generation O, the generation that is an orphaned generation. In reality, it's nothing new. And I reached out to Cassie because this has been on your heart for so long, Cassie. Going back on our story, Cassie, I'm just remembering probably one of the, it wasn't an embarrassing moment in my life, but it certainly was a nice failure in my life is when I first met you and we invited you as a speaker and we hired this church hall in Kraaifontein in South Africa. And I remember we ordered 600 box lunches for the people who were coming or supposed to come. But it turned out that the Springboks were playing an inconsequential game against Fiji or something that turned out to have some consequence. Nobody came. And I realized you don't plan a conference when the Springboks are playing a game. It's a no contest, you know.
It is still the same. It's still the same. You know, I was booked to fly up country now in about 3 weeks' time. And as soon as they discovered the Springboks are playing on the same day, they said, can we kind of massage the seminar around the game? So we are doing seminar, watching the game, continue to do the seminar. This is how it is in South Africa, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think we had about 40 people show up. And we gave away a lot of box lunches to a feeding ministry from George. So that was fun. They were the happy recipients of 560 meals or something.
Oh, boy.
But Cassie, I remember you were probably embarrassed on my behalf, but
fortunately, I can't remember it well, and the reason being, I've done quite a couple of these, events and so on that failed. So to keep my sanity, I prefer to not remember it too well. So I leave it go.
No, that's good. That's good. Yeah, but at that time, Cassie, you were doing an amazing work in Kaya Mundi, and we had an opportunity to learn from you for a couple of years and work alongside you and Jenny. And so that was back in 2003, 2004. In fact, prior to that, round about that time, we were taking a big team into Cape Town in October of 2003 to do the repurposing business venture in Durbanville. And the day before, what had happened was we did our first one in the southern suburbs. And then I felt that we needed to go to the northern suburbs. And the guys from the southern suburbs in Cape Town said, take a torch, take a flashlight, get a passport. You're going behind the Boerewors curtain. In other words, you're on your own. And the day before, we had 4 companies signed up and we expected 10. I had quite a big team. And thanks to Cassie and friends, but mainly Cassie, the next morning, I think about 14 people walked in or 17 clients walked in, and Cassie brought in all of his friends. So that was back in October of 2003, Cassie, and we appreciate you and the work you've been doing all of these years.
Yeah. No, thank you. I just serve the kingdom of God, So I think in a way it's very simplistic life. God speaks, I do. Try and keep it that way. The moment that I decide and try and get God involved, it doesn't work so well. I'm not sure why, but my plans would never really work out too well. So I prefer the other way around, that He speaks, I do.
Yeah. Cassie, let's go back a little bit on your background for those who don't know you. So you grew up in South Africa. What did you study? You were a famous rugby player back in the day. Tell us a bit
famous. Not that famous, but okay. I studied theology, so
Yeah.
for us to become a pastor, and that was in the notorious apartheid church, the Dutch Reformed Church. So I we had to study for 7 years. So you do 2 degrees, one diploma, and then I became a pastor. And so, fortunately, by God's saving grace, I almost want to say, I always wore two hats. So the one was the hat of a pastor, and then I started a parachurch organization called Sport Ministry, called
Yeah.
SCAT, Sport for Christ Action South Africa. So we started this with a few friends. So I had a what they used to call parachurch organization.
Yeah.
We didn't like that name, but okay, parachurch and church. So I had these two hats. But I think, looking back, that was God's grace because in this parachurch organization, I saw so many conversions, so many athletes, brilliant athletes come to Jesus.
Yeah.
And the way the Christian ethos is probably the
Yeah.
best way to say it of these people were different than
Yeah.
those that were acquainted to church too much. So
Yeah.
after they got converted, I said to
Yeah.
my fellow pastors, let's not take them to church. You may contaminate their faith. Let's keep them outside like an incubator and get them used to Jesus before you start with this churchy lingo and
Yeah.
confuse them. And any case, what I'm trying to say is a kingdom work is broad and it's fantastic. And I
Yeah.
fortunately had the privilege to do it inside the four walls of a
Yeah.
church, but also all the time,
Yeah.
Monday to Saturday people. These are the
Yeah.
people I wanted to invest in,
Yeah.
the other
Yeah.
people, the
Yeah.
non-pastors.
Yeah. And Cassie, as a sportsman yourself, and then you got involved in internationally, you were heading up an international Christian sports federation for quite some time.
Yes. Um, yeah, that's also God's way of doing things. I was the chaplain of the national team of South Africa, the 1995. Some people may have seen the movie Invictus. So I
Yeah.
was the chaplain, the pastor of that team. And then when someone saw that they prayed afterwards, it was the first time in history that rugby players actually prayed publicly on the
Yeah.
pitch.
Yeah.
And then someone saw this happen and they thought there's someone behind this. And then they invited me for the executive of this then called coalition. And then later, a few years later, I became the convener of this coalition. Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I'm sure on that day in 1995 there were a lot of South Africans praying, you know.
Yeah, as a rugby player, I learned this that I wasn't the kicker because I played a different position, and then I got into the position of the guy that normally kicks the conversions or the penalties.
Yeah.
And man, I saw big, massive guys pray that never prayed before because they were not sure that I would convert it, that I would be successful in the kicking. So
Yeah.
they prayed like never before, that God would just please, help this poor guy to do this penalty for us, and then I will follow you, that kind of which never happened. But in
Yeah.
any case, yeah,
Yeah.
praying in sport is you find frequently
Yeah.
for all kinds of reasons.
Many, many years ago, I read a book and it talked about statistically which professions had the most Christians in it, right? And I think the church was at about 97% or something. You would think it would be 100, but it was less than that. And then uh, right up there was the military and sports. Those were two which were very, very high. And then at the bottom was like media and journalists, you know.
Yeah, and I think you probably find more Christians in rugby than in ping pong because you can get killed.
There you go. Yeah. So, Cassie, I know that you had an influence around that, and I think it was on one of your sporting trips doing soccer up in Africa or whatever that the light bulb went on around this question of orphans. Tell us a bit about that experience.
Yeah, actually, I was invited to do leadership training, and I just prior to that, 3 years prior to that, I started a leadership school called International Sports Leadership School, where we train guys that would like to use the gospel to advance the kingdom in all kinds of ways. So we started this leadership school, and at that stage, we already had trained um, probably 16 of the leaders from African nations and then other nations as well. In total, probably 30 nations covered at that stage. Now it's much more. But then with this, how do you train leaders, quest and thoughts in my head all the time. I was invited to do training on Nyarangusu, which was a refugee camp. And after the training, I sat in a mud hut talking to some of the leaders to discover how do you end up in a refugee camp. And
Yes.
and the minutes that followed changed my life indelibly.
Yeah.
I can just, it seared my soul, I can say. It was the
Yeah.
most defining moment in my life when
Wow.
they told me how literally rebel forces came in and mutilated. They actually chopped off hands and arms and legs and cut open pregnant women and pulled out babies and chopped them up. And I mean, the most gruesome that you could ever even not even imagine. And
Yeah.
and one after the other saying that, I cried out to God and said, "What is the problem with Africa?" And
Yeah.
then it was a clear voice here inside that the problem is not poverty. The problem is not HIV/AIDS. I mean, they are huge problems. And at
Yeah.
that stage, a huge problem, HIV/AIDS. The problem is fatherlessness. There is a
Mhm.
root for all the problems that we carry, all the social pathologies that we carry in this world. There's a root cause for this, and that is fatherlessness.
Wow.
And that changed my life dramatically. Started to try and turn coaches, soccer coaches, and that's a connection with soccer, soccer coaches into fathers for the
Yeah.
players, and then
Yeah.
it evolved.
Yeah. Wow. That's quite a defining moment, I guess. I mean, most people in the world are never going to have that kind of experience.
Yeah.
Yet it brought into stark relief. Many years ago, we did some consulting for Prison Fellowship. It was back in 1997, 1998. And at that time, I read a book, Fatherlessness America and Fatherless America. And part of it was they had a database of the children of prisoners, 600,000 kids whose parents were in prison. And then Prison
Mm.
Fellowship realized one day, oh, we have the database of future prisoners if we don't do something about it.
Yeah.
Because the single biggest determinant as to whether somebody ended up in prison was their father or mother in prison.
Yeah.
And uh, and so I became a bit aware of the problem over there, but that's kind of academic, and you read about it and you see it. I mean, we got to work with Prison Fellowship, but you got to see something far more brutal.
Yeah, and you know why it's so important to have encounters with God and experiences that you just know this is not my thought patterns or whatever. This is God speaking. Is that passion is created, I believe, in the
Yeah.
tension between a crisis and a vision.
Yeah.
So many people do not live with passion. They say, oh, they can quote stuff. They can say this is a problem and that's a problem, but they're not passionate about it. So they don't turn their own life around because of this.
Yeah.
And God brought me really close to the crisis. I mean,
Yeah.
after just a year before we started to work in the town you mentioned, Kayamandi, which is a
Yeah.
township we call in South Africa, or ghetto, some people will call it.
Yeah.
And we start, and there I saw the youth, 90% of them without fathers. And
Mm.
so I could see the impact of that. Then I had the leadership school where we talked about town transformation. And so that was fresh in my mind. And then this encounter
Yeah.
with God, and there, where he said to me, I'm the God of the fatherless.
Yeah.
You don't take this serious. You think I'm just a father. You think I'm just a savior, and you can, whatever your relationship with me is. But if you really want a relationship with me, you want to see my heart, come
Mm.
close. Now
Mm.
I brought you close with this crisis to my heart. This pain is in my heart. How
Mm.
much do you care about the pain in my heart? God's
Mm.
heart.
Mm.
I always care about his pain in my heart, and I never thought of the pain in his heart. So how do you care about the pain in my heart? Come, let me show you. And
Yeah.
oh my, that was shocking. And it was not the only obviously experience. I mean, a few years later, working, and then a phone call, and a friend of mine said, Cassie, I'm standing on the body of my son, and his blood is running down the street. They just killed him. The gangs killed him, Cassie. The gangs killed him. And
Mm.
I said to him, his name is Eric. I said, Eric, no. He said, yes. And I got a phone call from the gang leader that said, I'm sorry, it was a mistake.
Oh my
And he's a
God.
father of 26 with a 6-year-old, 4-year-old, and 2-year-old children left behind for him to father as the grandfather. And then
Yeah.
suddenly your close friend is right there, where the crisis of fatherlessness is like so evident, like
Yeah.
in the gang violence in South Africa, which is brutal and
Yeah.
and beyond measure.
Mm.
And then it comes close,
Mm.
then it's yeah, I have to do something about it. We got to do something about it. So the crisis, close to the crisis, but then obviously also close to the vision. And that is, I don't think that even Christians spend enough time on dreaming what does it mean to have kingdom at home, to have heaven at home. They don't
Right.
think like that. They try and
Yeah.
survive at home, and everyone has got his role. And no, 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 no. This is not why Father sent His Son. He sent Him for heaven. So
Yeah.
you got to have this pull and push and pull, you could call it, the push of
Mm.
the crisis and the pull of heaven at home. And
Yeah.
and in between that, I think that passion and motivation is created, and we live
Yeah.
in that tension all along, and this is why we do what we do. Yeah.
Now, Cassie, it strikes me that part of what feeds into the fatherlessness or the feeling of being orphans of the generation that's today, they're not in a refugee camp and so forth. Many of them are living in fancy places, and you've ministered around the world and met with them. But it's the hopelessness that drains the passion. In other
Mm.
words, this is an aspirational generation. I mean, they want to see the world changed, but
Mm.
they've been fed a story that said it's hopeless because of climate, because of population, politics, economics, and some of it is real. It's real. I mean, they can't afford a house. They don't have stable jobs. They don't get a 40-year career, etc. And would you say that hopelessness, that hope deferred, drains the passion from a present generation and contributes to them actually being like orphans? Do you see that dynamic today?
Definitely, there are external factors like that I mean, call it, the day and age that we are living in.
Yeah,
But I think there's something else, and
yeah,
which is huge, and I don't think that people see this clearly enough.
yeah.
I'm currently busy writing a book, Boy's Soul to Man's Soul.
Mm,
And the reason for this is I have encountered, initially, I didn't want to write on manhood because the book I wrote, The World Needs a Father, is not on manhood. It is I call it a Kingdom DNA book, but it's a book for parents.
right.
And the bait that we use is children because to help them to know what to do each year of the life of a child.
Yeah,
But through that, we discovered the biggest the biggest effect of fatherlessness we find in the insecurities of people.
right.
And nowadays they have a new name for it. They call it small t, small trauma. So
Mm,
big T is when a dramatic thing happens with you. Small t is when what should have happened with you were neglected.
yes.
So if my mother did not give me intimacy shortly after birth, then I will always struggle to be close with people in team,
Yeah,
for instance, teamwork at the job, at my job, or even close to my wife. Actually, my mother, her absence can almost prescribe my future divorce
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
I can't get close to my wife because of my mother's neglect. So that is small t, small trauma.
yeah.
Now, um, that small t leaves us with insecurities.
Right.
And a different word for that is boy soul for men. They
Mm,
live with a boy soul. So that's an immature soul.
yeah,
It's inauthentic. And this is the big one.
yeah,
This is the big one, inauthentic. So we live in our false self and not our
yeah.
true self.
Right,
And the true self is a giver. The false self is a taker. So the new generation, unfortunately, there are more takers than there are givers.
right.
And that is the reason. The reason is because of the boy soul.
Mm,
Because they want success.
yeah,
They want whatever is dished up there to be, depict a successful life. But the question is, how much do they want to give?
Yeah.
So they can talk and big talk shows about climate change and what, but how much are they really willing to give? And so I think there's an intrinsic and not
Mm.
only extrinsic factors, but intrinsic factors. And the big intrinsic factor, I think, is inauthenticity
Mm.
because of not having dealt with your father and mother wounds, to be very specific,
Yeah.
and not having arrived at your true self. What has God invested in me to deposit on this earth
Yeah.
while the time I'm on this earth? And and
Yeah.
and that holds them back as well.
Mm.
Because just simply said, an adult, the man's soul, an adult takes responsibility,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
is a contributor. A
Yeah.
child is a taker.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you stay small as a child, and you don't grow into real adulthood, then you will be a taker, not a giver. And you may
Mhm.
be convinced of concepts and ideas and voices strongly, but you're really not a giver that thinks on how can I make a contribution that will be generational.
Yeah. That's fascinating. So these roots of insecurity produce, I mean, from what I've seen, either rejection feelings, I'm not good enough, or
Yeah,
rebellion, or some sort
yeah,
of combination of those things, which
yeah.
we see playing out in the streets. Oh, Cassie, what's been the most effective for you? Because you and Jenny are great parents, but no doubt not perfect parents, since none of us are. I mean, when we start off with, we have those little kids, we want to do nothing more than just represent God properly to them and so forth. But they grow up in their own way. What's been the most effective for you and Jenny to connect them to God as Father,
Mhm.
uh, since that's what we need to do, and there's a
Mhm.
generation that needs to know God as Father. What have been some of the things that have been helpful for you?
Yeah, yeah. I grew up. My father was a pastor as well in a parsonage, so I could feel a little bit of what they felt. The pastor's child. That's like a tag on you that you actually don't want on you.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then also I grew up at that stage. I was head of a big organization, so I was known. So everywhere that we would go, they would see me and greet me, and we could never go to a shop, and they hated that, to take dad with, and because of that. But in any case, so I was very conscious of the limitations
mm,
of my positioning, say that. And therefore I knew that me and my wife, we had to do whatever it cost to expose them, and give them opportunity for a first-hand experience with God.
yeah, yeah,
And I think that often we think that just reading Bible stories would cut it. I'm not 100% sure. So we
yeah,
did crazy things. Like, for instance, we took them to Calcutta, India, to work in Mother Teresa's home.
yeah,
And that confrontation
yeah,
with dying people, and they were like 13, 15 years old.
yeah,
The time was perfect, I think. Just entering teenage years and so on, and one in the middle of teenage years. So we did some stuff like that later on, obviously in townships and so on. And we sent them on trips into Africa and short-term missions and so on. And they had direct encounters with God. And that's why
yeah,
all of them are following Jesus, not because of our faith. They are now
yeah,
grown. They are 40 plus and late 30 years old. So they all follow Jesus, and they all talk about, and they all have disciples and so on. And so this is beautiful because of, I think, we didn't think that we need to create that faith for them. We
mm,
wanted to expose them to people of faith,
yeah,
experiences that were faith filled,
yeah,
miracle filled, you could say, but presence of God filled. And
yeah,
then, and most parents do not do this, this was probably the best. We surrounded them with people, nowadays we call them mentors,
yeah,
that were in between us and them. So the difference normally is about 25 years between you and your child, 25 or 30 years.
yeah,
And you need someone in between. So
yeah,
15 years. So you can mentor the one 15 years younger than you, but then he needs to mentor your child.
yeah,
And we had this in-between layer, which
yeah.
is created by discipleship. But if people do not do discipleship, they don't have it.
That's
But
right.
we
Yeah,
fortunately had that in-between layer, And
Yeah.
so they did not look at our faith, they looked at the faith of our disciples.
Yes. Yeah.
And that made a massive difference, I think.
Right. Right.
You know?
Yeah. I know when we were working with Prison Fellowship and the children of parents in prison, incarcerated parents, one of the goals was to increase the density of responsible adults in the life of the child.
Yes.
Yeah. And and sometimes that becomes a bit formulaic, but you have to say, okay, who's going to help them with sports? Who's going to help them with education? Who's going to get them to church? Who's going to take them to a youth group or to a boxing ring or whatever it might have been? And but in a normal, healthy family, you have those layers. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's amazing. That's really, really good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Cassie, unpack The World Needs a Father, because you wrote that book, but what's been happening with that, and where are you working? I know you're always working all over the world, but tell us a bit about what that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, the movement has grown. We started the movement in 2011 at the end of that year. And fortunately, initially, you just started talk here locally, but because I was traveling already for the sport ministry, then
Yeah,
I would then occasionally also chip in with that and so on, and then found amazing traction for it. And then because of God's favor, but definitely also because of the what we call, we tried to create a worldwide web of new generation leadership, and this is what we do with our two leadership schools. So we have one for sport and the other holistic community transformation, and we've now trained more than representatives of more than 160 nations in these two schools.
yeah,
So there's a pathway, one could say, for whatever you want to multiply across the world. So it may sound fascinating to say we're in 114 nations,
yeah,
but it's because of prior involvement in those nations with other things that we could
yeah,
go on the same pathway there. So it's broad. The movement is broad. South Africa, 112 active points or groups.
mm,
So we want to reach 200. So that would give us one third of the towns in South Africa, 667. So we want to
yeah,
reach a third of those towns with a presence of a group at least for a start.
yeah,
And if we can reach there, we believe that culture will start to change because people learn a new lingo.
yeah,
Fathers have never said before, "My job is to bring heaven home," and
yeah,
and we and but after the training, they dare to say it. And the moment
yeah,
that you dare to say it, you put on your shoulders a massive responsibility. My
yeah,
job is to bring heaven home. Okay, it's got to
yeah,
feel like heaven. It's got to have the key of a heaven life on earth and a few other things. And we know the keys and the building blocks, and we want to do this. So it's spreading widely. Nowadays, huge interest from schools, prisons,
yeah.
outside churches, obviously, and companies. And so, yeah, it's running very broadly now.
Fantastic, fantastic. I know back in the history of South Africa, we had the uh, imperialist, you might say, Cecil John Rhodes, who wanted to go Cape to Cairo, but he never made it. But when I go to Cairo, people ask me, "Do you know Cassie Carstens?" So, so because of the work you've done up there in Egypt. So there you
Yeah.
go. I think,
God gave us an amazing favor. I actually had a prophetic word. It's the only one that I ever had spoken over me in 97 in Jamaica.
yeah,
And that I would go breakthrough upon breakthrough in the Middle East. And I thought, what are you talking about? I've never dreamt or thought that it would ever be in the Middle East.
yeah,
Lo and behold, not more than 3 years later,
right.
I've then I used to go there every year, it's twice or three times, and God opened many doors, and yeah, so we have a lot of favor there.
Great, great. So, Cassie, as you look at the generation that's out there now. And I mean, there's all sorts of strata in society. But you look at this question of, well, backing up the strategy of the devil to make orphans out of people, uh,
Mm,
which you could say began in the Garden of Eden. And you could say that in some respects, that Lucifer or Satan orphaned himself by cutting himself off from the Father, and then seems to be through history wants to replicate himself in terms of other orphans who are
Mm.
cut off from the father, etc. So this has been a historical pattern, and you see it again and again, and you see in traumas like wars, genocides, but then just in everyday things where there's almost a culture. You talked about your kids finding God for themselves, but there's that inflection point where people either deal with the lack of loving authority in their lives by finding God, or by creating a godless substitute, and the orphan spirit, if you like, gets perpetuated. So how do you see that in the world today? And if you were talking to a younger version of your kids, people in their, say, in their 30s to their 40s, or their mid 20s to their mid 30s and so on, how would you encourage them, challenge them?
Sure. Big question. I obviously, derived a lot of my understanding from just observation and I read a lot of books, but I prefer that direct confrontation with situations, and I learn from with my eyes, just observing things. So I've seen this all along, and I derived my own theories about it. But one day I came across a book, Strange New World, written by Carl Truman. And then I think he captured the history and why we ended up where we are very, very well.
Mm.
Starting with Jean-Jacques Rousseau, that actually had 5 children that he gave to an orphanage before they were 2 or 3 years old. And if they did not all die, then at least 2/3 of those orphans always died, the
Yeah.
history says. So here is someone then with a philosophy that you, not external, but you, the norm of life, the orientation of life is here.
Mhm.
And how that evolved through Karl Marx, through Freud and other people, Friedrich Reich, and through other people, how it evolved to a point that I, I am what I feel.
Yeah.
Truth is what I feel here.
Yeah.
And it's not external, God-given permanent norms guiding my life. It is intrinsically, yeah, I feel it's right, then it is right. Whether it's right or not,
Mm.
I determine that. It's whatever I
Yeah.
feel is right. So he captures this in a book, which I think explains where we are.
Right.
So I very early in the life of my children, I started to say to them, life is not about you, and life is
Mm.
not about me.
Yeah.
Life is about God.
Yeah.
And we are finding our assignment from God to
Yeah.
just keep them, that absolute norms factor,
Yeah.
alive in their lives. And I think problem with new generation is a lot about feeling. Oh, I encounter this on a weekly basis that people just say, I don't love my wife anymore. I say, so what kind of statement is that? Where do you, how important is this? How do you get to this statement? Where do you do? No, but so us
Mm.
being so central in everything that happens is the
Yeah.
curse of our time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this the centrality of God is not there. So I am in the center. I've taken God's throne. That's exactly what Satan wanted from day one. And I
Yeah.
think by now he succeeded pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Interesting,
to help children, even the age that has grown to father children, listen, you cannot just tell them life is not about them. Show them. And the
yeah.
only way to really show them, Brett, um, something that transformed my life permanently was the
Yeah.
understanding of selfless sacrificial love.
Right.
Once I got that really deeply,
Mm.
and then knew life back home here is not about me. It's about whatever my wife needs or whatever my children need. Well,
Yeah.
firstly, what God needs, but what they need, and I will serve that. I become
Yeah.
the servant of that and don't live for myself. And
Right.
and since that has entered our home, it's heaven. It's
Yeah.
physical. We can really say, "Come, you want to experience heaven? Come to our house," because
Yeah.
no one lives for himself.
Yeah.
It's a selfless.
Yeah.
Heaven is the most selfless place.
Yeah.
Hell is the most selfish place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the difference there, if they can get that, then everything changes.
Yeah. 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 Wow, that's quite a statement. And was there something in particular that brought you to that point of selflessness?
Yes. Yes. A guy called Norm Wakefield came to visit South Africa.
Mm,
He wrote a book, Equipped to Love, and later Live to Love, and beautiful books and so on. Fantastic. But I listened to him,
mm,
and he explained how his fourth child was born, and he started to pray and out loud. And he
mm,
said, God, I praise you. The best gift you could ever give me a child. And she's beautiful and I love her. Perfect, perfect. And in the meanwhile, they were cleaning the baby, washing the baby. And then the doctor came back and walked up towards him with the baby in front of him and said, I'm so sorry. And he said, so what's wrong? And the doctor said, your baby is Down syndrome.
yeah.
And at that moment, God said to him, pray the same prayer now. Say, thank
Mm,
you, God. It's the best gift ever. Say she's
yeah.
beautiful. I
Yeah.
love the baby. Perfect. Say it. I could not pray.
Mm,
And then he realized he did not love the baby. He
mm,
loved the expectations for the baby.
yeah. Yeah.
And then God continued to talk to him, and you don't love your wife, you love your expectation, or neighbor, you love your expectations. So, and as he was narrating the story, I just knew that was my story. I did not
Mm,
love people. I
mm,
said that I love them. I was like a pastor smiling, pastorally, I love you, brother and sister, and so on. But actually, inside, I was just so irritated with
yeah.
people not measuring up. And then he continued to say, and the more pride you have, the more irritations you have.
Mm,
And the more pride you have, the more expectations you have. And the more expectations you have, the more irritations you have. And then I knew that was me.
mm,
My irritations came from my expectations, and that came from my pride. And that was such a conversion that I literally drove back to my wife, fell on the floor, and said, Jenny, we are married for 32 years now. I've never loved you. I've
mm,
never loved you.
mm,
I had it all wrong. The thing I called love was expectational love, which creates fear.
yeah.
And she lived with that. And also exchange love, which I do good things to get good things. But
Mm,
both expectational love and exchange love, they all revert back to me, what I
mm,
want.
yeah.
I die now before God. And I really believe that was the day that I did not only get converted to her, but also towards my love for God. Because now I don't love God for what I can get, but for
Yeah.
who He is. So if I don't get anything, I'm not angry with God because there's no expectation.
Yeah.
It's not about me. And the same with my wife. I tore up all the expectation, told her she never has to give me food or sex again, and I will still love her. And
Yeah.
that was hard to say. and but an amazing thing happened that all the small irritations, like she also has a disability, like that other girl. She can't close cupboard doors. My wife, it's impossible. And and initially it would irritate the daylights out of me. But since then, I no expectation for closed cupboard doors. They design cupboards with open doors now or no doors, so no expectation, and
Yeah.
everything is a surprise. Food and sex, they are surprises, not
Yeah.
expectations. So I
Yeah.
enjoy them thankfully, gratefully, and appreciate it. And everything is appreciation. If you have no
Yeah.
expectations, everything turns into appreciation. So I
Yeah.
just love my wife and everything that she does. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's lovely.
So that's an amazing statement about the irritation. And so you could almost say that, I was just chatting with somebody recently about saying that worry is a key performance indicator of hell. In other words, when we worry about stuff, that's what it is. But you would add irritation and expectation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Hell is just so filled with expectations. That's why it will be so filled with irritations. And it's not a foreign concept. You just know at home.
Yeah.
People, you ask them, do you have heaven at home? If you ask people, do you love your wife? Yes, of course I love my wife. Do you have heaven at home?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that. Okay, so what distinguishes heaven and hell
Yeah.
back home? And it's self-centered love or selfless love.
Mm,
Self-love or selfless love. That's the big difference.
yeah.
And that's the biggest thing to learn.
Yeah.
Mm.
So one of the things that is interesting, like in the Christian world, we actually develop language and courses and classes and everything to protect people from having to deal with this. And I think one of the words that's out there is like boundaries. It's like, no, in the Christian world. I mean, I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh yeah, and I know the guy who wrote the book and so on. So the thing the thing is this. I I have a real concern about this
Yeah.
because I know the main reason behind creating boundaries, abused women, for instance. Then you got
Yes.
to draw a line and say this is where it is. But now this is the same in South Africa. They start
Yeah.
with rights, and
Yeah.
then there's nowhere in the Bible that it talks about my rights. It talks
Yeah.
about rights, but not my rights. It's always
Yeah.
the rights of the other.
Yeah.
And now boundaries is the same thing. If I create a boundary not for myself, but for the other person not to transgress, for him to become holy or whatever, and not self-protection all the time, it's our
Yeah.
insecurities. The other day I said to someone, the more insecurities you have, the more boundaries you create,
Yeah.
which in itself then creates more insecurities.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm against boundaries for myself, but I will create a boundary for the guy that wants to burglar my house or whatever, for his sake, not to
Yeah.
transgress. So if
Yeah.
we can switch boundaries for the sake of the other and truly do it for the sake of the other,
Yeah.
then I think we'll have a better world. But now, unfortunately, we have twisted this word
Yeah.
boundaries into a self-protective measure,
Yeah.
and Jesus is not so self-protected. But
Yeah.
when Jesus is protective, he's protective of his Father.
Yeah.
He's protective of other people.
Yeah.
Self-protection. So I think the motivation for the
Yeah.
boundaries that we create, and as you said, it's become a common word everywhere. The
Yeah.
motivation, what lies behind it, is the contaminating factor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So not necessarily the word, but the motivation.
Yeah.
Uh, Self-preservation and self-promotion are the first things that the insecure person does.
Yeah.
And boundaries is one of them, for protecting myself. So for instance, practically speaking, if I say no, I cannot see you at 11 o'clock. I cannot say no, I cannot see you in 11 o'clock because I want to watch TV at 11 or whatever. You need time for TV and recreation and all of that stuff. That's fine. And you can, but if I say I cannot see you now because I want to be well rested,
Yeah.
so that I can serve you and other people tomorrow well. Then I
Yeah.
create the boundary for the other person. And
Yeah.
the person I learned the most from is Richard Foster, that said, only mercy limits mercy. So
Yeah.
for the mercy that I want to give the other person, I limit the mercy I now give to you. But it's for
Yeah.
the other person, it's not for yourself. And one can argue, this is like a thin line. It is a thin line. It's the thin line between the spirit and the flesh.
Yeah.
And we just have to fight self-centeredness all the time. That's the point. Even with the word boundaries, we got to
Yeah.
change it.
Yeah. 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 You're reminding me in some of your conversations, my brother who, you know, said to me one day, marriage is very, very easy so long as you're prepared to die every day.
Exactly. Humanly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's very interesting, Cassie, these connections between insecurity, authenticity, feeling like we're fatherless, and then creating the self-protection measures to really prevent us from getting irritated or or to have our expectations met. It's very interesting because in the world, I think partly, and then this concept of truth that you touched on, Oprah, it's like your truth is the important thing. I was just chatting last week with Charlie Self, and we were looking at some of the historical things, the Jean-Jacques Rousseau and some of those people that you talked about. And I remarked that the CEO of National Public Radio said, well, the important thing is not truth, but how do we all feel? And this is somebody
Oh,
heading up a media agency and so forth. So this concept of there's no absolute truth, it's your truth. and then the unintended consequences of the
Yeah.
insecurity that comes from that, the disconnect from people, the disconnect from God. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly believe the way I'm trying to explain it to the students that we have at the leadership schools is when you bake a bread. Now, I'm not a baker, so I this is from teaching from my wife. Or I asked her, "How do you bake a bread?" And she said there are four ingredients. It
Yeah.
is the wheat,
Flower,
wheat
yeah,
flour,
yeah,
and the raising or yeast or raising powder or whatever you want to call it, and water
mm,
and salt. Now, I think we have our mix wrong because you can't, in equal measures, put salt and the wheat flour
mm,
in the cake, in the and baking of the bread. It won't work.
yeah,
So some you have to add a little, and others, the flour is the main ingredient. I think
yeah,
everyone will agree with that.
yeah,
This is what it is. In Christianity, the flower is selfless sacrificial love because Jesus said, "A new law I give to you." And not
yeah,
as people explain it, love yourself first before you love others. Jesus didn't say that, sorry. That as, you can go in the Greek, and there are two possibilities of the explanation of as. And you find the right explanation in Ephesians that says, love your wife as your own body, which means as you naturally think of your own body for coffee in the morning, you now naturally think of your wife for coffee in the morning.
yeah,
So it is in the same way, not love yourself first. It's nothing like this. So don't ever say love yourself first. No, 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 it's nonsense. Value yourself. They use
sure,
the wrong word. It's value yourself because you're created by God. You cannot devalue yourself. But love others first. That is
yeah,
Jesus. A new law is love them as I loved you. And he didn't love himself first at the cross.
yeah,
He loved us first. And the guy said to him, "Save yourself first, and then us." And he refused. So it's love others first. If we can make love others first the main ingredient of our marriage, of anything, of our brotherhood, of life,
mm,
then we will have heaven on earth.
mm,
And this is what, I mean, God sent his son all the way to come and teach us this, but we don't get it.
yeah,
So now it's the other way around. Now it's about us, and Jesus is there for me, and not I'm there for him, but he's there for me, and God is there
yeah,
for me. Everything is the opposite, the other way around. And that
yeah,
brings hell. Uh,
yeah.
Brett, do you know the little legend about the difference between heaven and hell of the stiff arms? Do you know that story? Can I?
Yeah, tell us, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very briefly, there's a little legend that said heaven and hell looks exactly the same. Big
yeah,
tables, fantastic food, the best you can imagine.
yeah,
At the entrance to heaven and hell, they do the same at the door. They stiffen your elbow so you
yeah,
cannot bend it.
yeah,
And then they tighten a spoon to your hand,
yeah,
and then they send you in. So everyone goes into heaven and hell the same way.
yeah,
And then they just say, "Eat." So
yeah,
hell is hell because everyone tries to feed himself,
yeah,
and it's not possible.
yeah,
Heaven is heaven because they just, with stiff arms and all, they just feed each other. They're not thinking of themselves.
yeah, yeah,
And that's exactly the difference between what we have in our day and age, stiff arms trying to feed themselves instead of thinking of the other person. And if we can turn this around, heaven will come to every home, I'm sure.
mm, mm. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Cassie, it's been a delight talking about these topics, and I want to just ask you as we head towards a close over here, as you are addressing these things around the world, what are some of the breakthroughs that you've seen? Some of the stories where you say, okay, this person was in this situation and this is where they are now. And to give people some encouragement to say, well,
Yeah.
actually, I wasn't that bad, but God can
Yeah.
pull me through. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I fortunately can say I think I've seen more miracles than most other people have. And I can recall so many, and just last week again, and so people coming to me and say, "I've been divorced from my wife," and then I
Yeah.
came to the training, and then I
Yeah.
discovered what love truly was supposed to be, and then I
Yeah.
went back to her, and we remarried. Yes, my wife, and it's now 2, 3 years later, and we have heaven at home.
Wow.
I'm thinking of this father that procreated two children with this girl, and he's
Mm.
not living far from here. And and then after the training, he said, "I'm the father of these two children. For them, I'm going to live for them, and for them, I'm going to marry this woman that I never married actually, I never loved actually, but I'm going to marry her."
Yeah.
And this friend, he became a friend then later on, and then he went back and he married her, and then 4 years later he is saying we've got heaven at home, and I'm
Yeah.
married to her, and we have another two children, so we're four now, and but I'm married to her. So we see miracles like this.
Mm.
But the biggest and the most beautiful miracle. Oh, let me give you one. I'm
Mm.
not going to say the name of the country
Yeah.
because the Christians are persecuted in this country.
Right.
But so this 14-year-old boy, I'm sitting in this home, and then the guy said to this 14-year-old boy, you wanna say what happened after your father's training? And he said this. He said, before the training, I would phone home and say, Mom, is Dad there? If she said Dad is here, I would stay away from home until it was dark because I needed to be in the house at dark at dusk, and then I would come home. Now I phone again, and I still phone, and I say, Mom, is Dad home? And she says yes. I rush home because I
Mm.
can't wait to be with my dad. Now
Wow.
he said, 14-year-old boy. Now he said it, everyone in tears in the room.
Yeah.
6 months later, the whole family got converted
Yeah.
because of initially just doing what is right
Mm.
and seeing the impact. And then later, you know what? We've discovered now something more is behind this. It's not
Mm.
just a few good ideas.
Yeah.
This is how life is intended to be, how God intended this to be, and we want to surrender our lives to Him. So,
Mm.
stories like that, we've got hundreds and hundreds of that, and it's lovely.
Mm. Percy, that scripture has been on our minds a lot in recent years. Turn the hearts of the children to the
Mm,
parents, turn the hearts of the parents to the Lord. And there are these old phrases from thousands of years ago, and who would know that they become so relevant? And I just
mm,
love that story because there you've got a son loving the father as if the father is a proper father, and then the
yeah,
father becoming a proper father. So I love the upwards redemption in that story.
yeah, mm,
And so for children who don't have perfect
mm,
parents, such as my children, the fact that you can love your parents into perfection, into
yes,
being the heavenly parents that they should be,
yes,
is also a powerful thing. You're not a victim.
mm,
You have an influence, a power, an authority by loving them into. And the same thing for wives and husbands, husbands and
mm,
wives, and so forth. It's not, well, if Jenny does this, or if George does this, or if this one does that, then it can begin as it did with that boy. What a powerful story.
yeah. Unconditional love, really, I prefer to call it no expectation love.
Yeah.
No expectation love is the key to heaven for all of us. We better venture into that direction.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Cassie, it's been a delight. I have one last question for you. Do you remember when we first spoke?
That wasn't in Kaimandi, it was before Kaimandi.
Yeah, yeah, it
It
was
was,
our good friend Graham Power.
that's right.
I'd been introduced by Graham from Merton to Graham Power. I was sitting in Graham's office and talking about what we were doing with repurposing business and bringing teams to Cape Town and so on. This was in early 2003. It was February 2003, and Graham said, "You have to talk to my friend Cassie," and he called you right away, as Graham did. And you were on a vacation or on a trip up in Namibia, and you said, "Yeah, sure, sure, I'll talk with him when I'm back." And that's how we were introduced by Graham, who's obviously having a great time in heaven right now. But
Yeah.
that,
But you've been a blessing to my life, Brett, without you knowing it. The books that you wrote, I could just see here is someone understanding the kingdom well, and specifically, we struggle to that dichotomy of living with God and then doing my life or whatever, Monday to Saturday life. You seem to bridge that beautifully, and I've learned a lot from that. Still learning from you, and great to just talk to you.
thank you so much, Cassie. Well, blessings to you, and thank you so much for sharing. This is such an important topic. If people want to check out The World Needs a Father, they can just Google it. But do you have any other specific references you want to share? I think right
Yeah,
now they can find you on TV. They can find The World Needs a Father up on Amazon, right?
yeah. Yes, they can. And they, or TWNAF, the short for the world needs a father.com
Yeah,
website, and you can go and check us out on the website.
fantastic. Thank you so much, Cassie. God bless you. It's been a delight to speak with you today. I really, really appreciate it.
My joy.